Tonight on Early Edition at 6, President Park Geun-hye, in an unprecedented move, meets with the leaders of the country's ruling and main opposition parties to discuss how to break a parliamentary deadlock that worsened after the prosecutor general suddenly offered to hand up his resignation. South and North Korea reopened their jointly run industrial complex in a trial run, reviving the lone symbol of inter-Korean economic cooperation 5 months after it was shuttered amid the North's threats of a preemptive nuclear attack. And former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers withdraws his candidacy to succeed Ben Bernanke as head of the U.S. Central Bank, and it stirred up markets all across the globe. We'll have the details on Early Edition at 6.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, noon in Damascus, and 6 on a Monday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gun-young.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us. We begin with the three-way dialogue between President Park Geun-hye and the leaders of the ruling and main opposition parties.
That is correct. The dialogue between the three took place at the National Assembly and came to a close just about a little under an hour ago, and Monday's meeting was a landmark event because it was actually the first time a sitting president had visited the National Assembly for the purpose of holding talks with the heads of the rival parties in hopes of breaking a political deadlock.
That's right, we're having a lot of first times here. To find out what was discussed at the three-way talks, let's go over to our political correspondent Kim Hyun-ji, who is standing by at the National Assembly. Hey, Hyun-ji, tell us about the main talking points today.
Yes, Daniel, we have yet to hear from the ruling Treasury party about the issues they brought up at the talks with the president. But we do know that they lasted for more than an hour, which is longer than originally planned. We are getting reports that the ruling party did focus on the livelihood issues, as it had mentioned it would do so before the meeting. Coming out of the talks, ruling party leader Hwang Woo-yeol told reporters that they discussed a range of issues and that he expects positive outcomes because President Park talked to the opposition party leader with sincerity. But Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil told reporters right after the meeting that he did tell the president everything, but he said, quote unquote, there were no right answers. Now, as for the main opposition Democratic Party, leaders reportedly made very specific requests to President Park about reforming the spy agency, which stands accused of meddling in last year's presidential election through an online smear campaign against opposition candidates. First, the opposition party leader told President Park that the National Assembly should be in charge of reforming the National Intelligence Service. Now, this proposal is at odds with the stance President Park has taken regarding the issue. She had previously ordered the NIS to come up with reform plans on its own. The opposition party also asked the president to lay out how she intends to address this issue before the Chuseok holiday, which begins this Wednesday. Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil also asked President Park to offer a public apology for the spy agency's interference in last year's presidential election, not because she had ordered them to do so, but because the case tainted the nation's constitution and democracy.
Now, Hyun-ji, those are very, very specific requests made by the main opposition. Now, what else was discussed during this, I believe, 90-minute talks?
As expected, the Democratic Party also brought up the issue of Prosecutor General Choi Dong-uk's sudden resignation last Friday. The opposition party leader is quoted as saying that there is evidence that the presidential office pulled strings to take him down because it was unhappy with the prosecution's investigation into the spy agency scandal. Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil also expressed concerns that the nation's efforts to promote fair business practices and advance welfare policies may be slowing down. The opposition party also said the nation should retract tax cuts for the rich.
Okay, so a lot has been covered today, but Hyun-ji, what's in progress right now as we speak?
Yes, Daniel. After seeing the president off, the leaders of the rival parties came together to draft a joint statement. The two parties are expected to disclose this statement soon at the National Assembly separately. Some sources say forming a special parliamentary committee for the reform of the spy agency will be included in the joint statement. The ruling Treasury Party will have its own briefing about today's meeting at 6:30 p.m. Here at the National Assembly. And the main opposition Democratic Party has convened an all-member meeting of its lawmakers to discuss their next move now that the talks is over. It remains to be seen whether today's talks satisfy both the ruling and main opposition parties and whether the Democratic Party will wrap up its outdoor protests and get back to devoting all its energy to parliamentary business. Back to you guys.
All right, that was Arirang's Kim Hyun-ji reporting live on the president's talks with the leaders of the rival political parties at the National Assembly, and we'll have the updates for you on those talks in our later newscast. Meanwhile, staying at the National Assembly, a special ethics committee has begun reviewing the qualifications of 11 lawmakers, and that includes a Unified Progressive Party lawmaker Lee Seok-gi. Now, Lee was arrested earlier this month on charges of conspiring to topple the government with a shadowy group called the Revolutionary Organization. Now, the committee is also considering the ruling party's motion to expel Lee, signed by all 153 members of the party.
The Legislation and Judiciary Committee is discussing the political turmoil whipped up by Prosecutor General Choi Dong-uk's resignation. While the ruling party refused to attend the meeting, opposition parties are demanding a probe into whether the Justice Ministry may have influenced Choi to step down with an announcement to investigate allegations he had an illegitimate son.
And now on to a developing story. A man was shot dead by the South Korean military in Gyeonggi province earlier this Monday afternoon while reportedly trying to cross the river into North Korea.
A military official said that they fired several warning shots, but the man, currently unidentified, ignored them. He was shot and killed after jumping into the Imjin River.
Now, 5 months after it was shuttered amid North Korea's threats of a preemptive nuclear attack, the inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex resumed operation on this Monday in the most concrete sign yet that North Korea may be trying to improve its ties with the outside world.
The companies, however, face several hurdles to get their businesses back on track. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports from the Inter-Korean Transit Office at the South's border with the North.
165 days. That's how long the Kaesong Industrial Complex has been sitting idle. But Monday marked a new start for the two Koreas, as over 800 South Korean industrial workers went to Kaesong to reboot their machines and get back to work. The South Koreans said that most of the North Korean workers who were there before the suspension were back at their positions on Monday. One executive said he also noticed a positive change.
Most importantly, there has been a change in attitude from the North. I believe the complex will become the backbone for enhancing inter-Korean economic cooperation in the future.
Around 60% of the 123 South Korean firms were in Kaesong and got back to work on Monday. But the road to normal operation looks like it'll be a rocky one.
Since the factory Park has been closed for over 5 months, the firms are lacking orders from buyers. It'll probably take more than a year to reach normalization.
To minimize losses, South Korean firms in Kaesong need to attract old and new buyers in order to operate at full capacity. Meanwhile, the Export-Import Bank of Korea is pressuring firms to return money they've taken from the Inter-Korean Economic Cooperation Insurance Fund, which is set up to help the companies take over during the shutdown. 46 firms took roughly $140 million from the fund, but paying it back could be difficult, especially considering they haven't made any sales for over 5 months. In response to concerns, the Kaesong Emergency Committee will ask the government to extend the payback date, currently set for October 15th. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Paju.
And today, the two Koreas also exchanged their final lists of those selected to participate in an upcoming round of inter-Korean family reunions. Red Cross officials from both sides met at the truce village of Panmunjom earlier this Monday morning to exchange those names.
Seoul's Unification Ministry said that 96 South Korean divided family members and 100 from the north will take part in the reunions that are slated to start next Wednesday for 6 days at the Mount Kumgang Resort in North Korea. This is the first time in 3 years that Seoul and Pyongyang will hold such an event after the reunions were halted due to strained inter-Korean relations.
Now, meanwhile, North Korea's top nuclear envoy arrived in Beijing on this Monday for a seminar on nuclear issues on the Korean peninsula. Kim Gae-kwan and his delegation will attend a meeting on Wednesday organized by the Chinese government that involves academics and officials from the members of the six-party denuclearization talks.
Experts say the trip by the North Korean officials show Pyongyang's determination to return to the negotiating table. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, however, have said that they will not send high-level officials to Wednesday's meeting because the North has yet to show its sincerity towards denuclearization.
Now, in the latest sign of a thaw on the divided Korean peninsula, hundreds of cars and trucks streamed across the border on this Monday to take South Korean managers and raw materials back to a jointly operated industrial park in the north border town of Kaesong, where factories resumed operations after a 166-day hiatus.
Also, the two governments exchanged lists of names of people who will be allowed to meet with long-lost relatives from across the border, another inter-Korean program that is being resumed.
Right, so are we seeing improving relations on the Korean peninsula? Well, joining us live to give us some perspective is Dr. Kim Chul-woo, Senior Research Fellow at the Korean Institute for Defense Analyses.
Dr. Kim, thank you for joining us again.
Happy to be here.
Now, Dr. Kim, let's begin with the resumption of operations at the Kaesong Industrial Park. Now, many are viewing this latest development in positive light, of course, especially because of the change of attitude that the North Koreans took leading up to the resumption of operations. Now, we'd like to hear your thoughts on that, as well as on the kind of points that Pyongyang, I guess, compromised on in order to open the factory park.
I don't want to use the compromise. Compromise is a little bit different at this setting because this kind of action, reaction, inaction. I want to use the both Pyongyang and Seoul is trying to use a new set of co-orientation model for their own strategic goals. For the Pyongyang, I think the motivational point is their sense of urgency. As we all know, the international isolation, economic sanctions, and particularly China's pressure and persuasion have worked out pretty good. So I think the Pyongyang wants to get out of this kind of quagmire of their own version. But for the South Koreans has a very strong sense of upper hand. You know, trust is much more important than the speed, right? So the South Korean government is taking time and principle-based, step-by-step approach. It's a very different, but all the menu and agenda setting is all the resumption, not the fresh start is something new, resuming the old cards. But the Park Geun-hye government trust the building processes worked out pretty good. So I think the overall strategic setting is very strongly appealing to the Seoul. So I think the North Koreans are trying to get out of this quagmire to achieve their own strategic goals. I think we at this juncture, all the international community should use the strategy of encouragement instead of blaming, their responsibility. Yes, nuclear issue is a big issue, but it's still step-by-step approach. It's very appropriate actions we can take at this moment.
Right, more carrots and sticks, according to Dr. Kim, at the moment for North Korea. We do have some very promising developments. Of course, we mentioned earlier that we have the resumption of the separative families, and we have the final list there of some 200 people there. So that's really, really positive developments for the Korean relationship.
Right, and if I may add, right after the family reunions, we're also expecting inter-Korean working level talks on possibly resuming tours at Mount Kumgang Resort.
Right, so Dr. Kim, the question is, could we take all these positive signs as something that could clearly easily overshadows some of the doubts that linger in the air because of the unresolved nuclear issue with North Korea.
I'd like to characterize this situation as a blinking green light instead of blinking yellow light. Red light is likely to go to the red light. So I think that we can continue on, although it's blinking in some sense, sometimes tug of wars and psychological impact. So I think why don't we just making the timing and the sequence of the blinking. So I think we have to get over that. So with the successful starting of the Kaesong Industrial Complex resuming, and then family union will give us great political momentum because of all the sentimental, psychological impact can build upon the general public, including the international community. I think that's a strong, kind of a jumping stone to get over the second hurdle. So I think we should keep this green light on to move on to the more hard and bumpy, issues like a nuclear reactor stuff.
That's right. I mean, however, right before the nuclear reactor step, I believe, is the resumption of operations at Mount Kumgang Resort. The South Korean government has been standing firm on its stance that the family reunion issue and the resumption, or Kaesong issue and the resumption of Mount Kumgang tours need to be dealt with separately. Now, what are some key factors that will make the final decision on perhaps reopening the tours?
One word: trust. Because of the vicious circle of old days, we still have a very reserved stance on that. But as I again mentioned, the whole overall strategic setting has changed greatly because successful summit talks with the President Obama and President Xi Jinping and the Park Geun-hye, very unique, good initiative restart and requires some trust. Building processes, like a building blocks. So I think at this juncture, the overall setting goes directly and indirectly to go to six-party talks. So that's why the Beijing and Russia and North Korea is relatively very assertive comparing to the other side of three, Seoul and Tokyo and Washington. So I think why they are reluctant to go back into the talks because of they are not likely to have the talks for the sake of talks. So the Seoul really wants to have authentic, meaningful, and credible talks. So I think even Kumgangsan tour project looks like economic issues is the clearly and directly linkage with the international community sanctions, economic sanctions, because we are paying with cash. So I think we are just opening a little bit door to the North Koreans getting the money they desperately need. So I think it looks like an economic and inter-Korean issues, but it's closely related to the six-party talks issue.
Right, it's a source of cash flow for North Korea.
Yes, indeed.
In many cases. Well, going back to another unfortunate developments from North Korea, we receive satellite imagery showing that they are restarting the Yongbyon nuclear facility. This raises the question: why are they doing that right now? Why are they taking out the nuclear car?
I'd like to advise you to don't rush to the conclusion. Are they starting the nuclear issue and in Yongbyon nuclear, plutonium reactor? Technically, North Koreans has not made any public announcement or any kind of authorized authorities have recognized their intentions. Yes, indeed, in April they announced their plans to restart under the heavy military, tensions, rhetorical wars. That's one thing. But at this point, the international community, instead of pointing out that stuff again and mixed with all the blinking green light with the blinking red light, so why don't we just take time and to see what will happen by the North Korean authority if they have their own strategic goals? I think that they can make a very acceptable or meaningful excuses they can make. So instead of giving too much splash on the kind of the private institutions' finding, why don't we waiting for the, North Koreans' response with a sense of upper hand?
Right. It's time for us to give them the innocent until proven otherwise approach instead of the other way around.
Right, and it's in the nature of us media that we jump to conclusions with the slightest bit of hints. Now, so all in all, Dr. Kim, your prospects on the future inter-Korean relations?
I'm very positive because at this juncture is the one and only time, starting from the easiest thing to the get over the more harder thing for forthcoming. Yes, indeed, this could be the bumpy and lots of problems, but we've experienced the strategy of patience, but it's time to restart, resuming everything with the new perspective, which means co-orientational development for the peace and security on the Korean Peninsula and to the world.
Okay, clean slate, that's what you're suggesting, and let's hope we can do that, and let's hope we can have a positive outcome from that. Well, Dr. Kim Chol-woo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now shifting gears to the economy, Korean import prices rose by 2 points.
Moving on to other stories, the U.S. dollar has fallen and share prices gained after the White House said former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers had withdrawn from the race to be the Federal Reserve's next chief. Investors are anxiously awaiting the outcome of the U.S. Federal Reserve's crucial meetings this week on when and how much to wind down its bond purchases. Our Kim Young-gil reports.
Larry Summers has pulled out of the contest to succeed Ben Bernanke as the chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve. After the White House confirmed President Obama accepted the decision by the former Treasury Secretary on Sunday, the U.S. dollar weakened and stocks and bonds rallied in Asia on hopes that Bernanke's successor, unlike Summers, will slowly wind down Fed's easy monetary policies. Summers' withdrawal strengthens the chance for current Fed chairwoman Janet Yellen, the other leading candidate to replace Bernanke. She is believed to be less inclined to quickly reverse quantitative easing, which might rattle the global markets. Such cautious approach in reducing large-scale asset purchases will have a positive effect on the emerging markets, given that investors had left the market in fear of quick withdrawal of the stimulus. Summers' surprise decision came shortly before Fed policymakers meet on Tuesday and Wednesday to decide the timing and extent of dialing back the central bank's monthly government bond purchases from the current pace of $85 billion. The purchases are aimed at holding down long-term interest rates, thus increasing borrowing and investing in order to create more jobs and lower unemployment. Despite the assurances that the stimulus would be withdrawn gradually and that interest rates will not be raised anytime soon, investors are still uneasy. If yields shoot higher even after this week's Fed meeting, confidence could be hit and the already feeble U.S. recovery could stumble, while investors in emerging markets could further head for the exit. The Fed each month buys $45 billion in Treasury bonds and $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities, and the U.S. monetary policy largely determines global capital flow. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And we are getting reports that a joint statement has not been completed or has not been formed by the three-way talks between President Park Geun-hye and the leaders of the ruling party and the main opposition party. Now, the ruling party was set to announce their findings or their results from the three-way talks at 6:30 p.m. Korea time, which is in about 10 minutes. And the main opposition opened a key session of within their party to discuss the sticking points that developed during the talks and were supposed to announce their results after that meeting. But we are getting reports right now that a joint statement between the two parties has not been completed after the talks between President Park Geun-hye and the two leaders. We'll have more for you in a later newscast. Meanwhile, moving on, Japan has shut down its last functioning nuclear reactor, Reactor 4, at Ohi with no timetable for a restart. Officials say the reactor based in western Japan stopped generating electricity early this Monday morning. Analysts say Japan will now be without nuclear power until December at the earliest, as it will take weeks, if not months, to clear all the safety checks and legal steps necessary to restart operations. Now, since the meltdowns at the Fukushima plant in March 2011, plants around the country have been closed either for scheduled maintenances or because of safety fears and haven't been switched back on. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is desperate to see the reactors back online, as Japan has been forced to import huge amounts of coal, liquid natural gas, and other fuels to keep the power flowing.
Time for weather, which means we turn to our Michelle Park. Michelle, it's supposed to be autumn, but it's still a little bit too hot, isn't it?
That's right, Daniel. But at least now we have the cooler mornings and nights.
And no rain in the forecast, unlike last week, right?
That's right, Kanyang. But this temperature fluctuation that's going on, we should keep our food well stored for the long holiday as well that's coming up so soon. And for tomorrow, there's going to be a high of temperature of 30 degrees in the afternoon, which is going to be hotter than today. Seoul will reach up to 30 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities of Gwangju and Busan will also peak at 30 and 29 degrees respectively. Down onto Jeju Island, you'll see sunny skies just like today. Dokdo and Mankumgang should be a little cooler. Well, that's all I have for you tonight. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And that's all from us for this hour. Thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Gonyang. Thank you as always for staying here with us. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Good night.